How are you doing? Welcome to Valet Stories, and I'm Alex. Now I'd like to thank all the people who have newly subscribed to our channel to hear some of our crazy valet stories. Well, on this week's episode, we're going to be discussing something that I think all of you've wanted to hear for a long time, which is stories that involve sex and our valet parking attendants. Now, whether you believe it or not, a lot of these stories have come to my attention because the valets have told me in passing, either months or even years past the time that it's happened, hoping that I wouldn't get upset or fire them. How am I going to fire them as long as it didn't happen under our care or while they were parking cars? Now, whatever they do after work, that's completely their business. But yes, some of the stories are funny, and I'm here to share some of those stories with you. One of the first stories you guys might have heard on the other channel, but this one has a little bit more details, and obviously there's a new follow-up story. And that involves one of our valets, and we're going to call the valet Chris. I don't want to give too many details about who exactly this valet was, because a lot of our current and old valets still watch these videos, and they know exactly who I would be talking about otherwise. So let's call this valet Chris. I got a phone call from, and you want to guess, Bar One. You remember this restaurant that I always said a lot of our stories are going to stem from? This is Bar One. This is the one whose husband used to be a part, or the wife was a part of Housewives of Atlanta, and this was the husband, and he owned this restaurant called Bar One. Anyway, our valet Chris was there, and I get a phone call from the owner of Bar One, which his name is Peter, and he's like, "Hey Alex, I just got a very disturbing phone call." I said, "Okay, tell me." He's like, this female customer said that your valet showed up at her hotel room at 12 o'clock midnight and followed her home." I'm like, well, that's crazy, because we all know Chris is a pretty transparent guy. He doesn't do that type of thing, but let me find out what's happening. Give me the phone number. Let me give her a call. So I get the phone number, I give this lady a call, and I said, what happened? And she said, well, your valet showed up at midnight, and he was knocking on the door. My husband was knocking on the door, and it was just a very bad situation, and she got a lot of trouble from her husband. I said, well, that's weird. Give me some more information. What happened exactly? Did he just show up? How would he get your address? And she said, well, she was staying at a hotel. And I'm like, how would he know where the hotel is? She said she had her receipt in the not dashboard, but on the floorboard when she came by the restaurant earlier. So the valet must have seen it and come over to her hotel room, which is extremely strange, but let me call my valet anyway. So I called my valet and I said, hey, what happened last night? Did you go to some lady's hotel room? And he's like, how in the world would you know that? Did you go to some lady's hotel room late last night? And he said, actually, I did. I said, what was that all about? Because she's telling me that you were stalking her and you got her address off the piece of paper and you followed her to her hotel room at midnight. He's like, Alex, you will not believe me, but this lady had been texting me all night. She came into the restaurant about 5 or 6 o'clock at night. She left out about 7, and she was flirting with me. She wanted me to come to the hotel room. She gave me her phone number, and she gave me the address. In fact, here are the text messages. I'm not going to show you the text messages, but there was a text message that went back and forth. I said, really? Screenshot that, send that to me right now. So he sends it to me. He said, yeah. So I went over to the hotel, and when I got there, her husband was there. So I don't know what happened, but the husband, it was just a really, really weird situation. I said, why in the world would you do that? You don't know what this lady's capable of. You could have gone over there and she could have had 20 guys in the room to jump you and steal your money. I'm like, not a smart move, but again, that's not my business. That's whatever he does after hours, and this creating more stories that we share later on down the line. So I discussed with him a little bit more, and I'm like, well, what do you think happened? He's like, I don't know what it was, but that's that. That's all I needed to hear. I took that information, called this lady back, and I said, hey, you know what? I don't think, in fact, this did happen the way you said. I have text messages here saying that he went back and forth with you and you gave him the address to come over to the location. And in fact, this is the phone number. And she's like, well, that's not my phone number. I said, well, this is the phone number we have. So it finds out that she has a burner phone or a throwaway phone, and this is the phone that she uses to text message back and forth. Regardless, I tell her, hey, you know what? You can call the police, give us the information, give our information, and we'll do as much as possible to support you as much as possible. Of course, we don't hear anything from her, and that's pretty much a closed case. Now, the last time I shared this story was pretty funny, and I find out, let's call him Chris the valet, he's like, hey, I never told you. But about a month later, she reached out to me again, And yes, I did meet up with her, and yes, they did have relations. I'm like, you're so stupid. Why are you still dealing with this lady? Apparently you didn't get jumped, and it was that. There are enough women in Atlanta. You have to go for the one who has a husband that you know about. I rather not even say anything more about it, but he did end up getting with this girl about a month later, and this was pretty crazy. Now, the next valet, this was actually before I owned the company. I used to work for another valet parking company 20-something years ago. So I was a much younger guy. This guy was older than me, and he was a smooth-looking guy. He had long hair, I guess, good facial features, and women loved him. Constantly, whenever women would come into the restaurant, they would comment on this guy's hair. They wanted to touch it, play with it, and this guy was smooth. He was good with all of the ladies, and the ladies loved him. Well, this valet, again, let's call him Chris, was known to, I guess the expression is, bed these women. He would sleep with all of these women. And it seemed, at least on a monthly basis, at least twice a month he was leaving with a different woman. Not every single night, but at least twice a month there was a woman that was leaving with him. Sometimes he would take him across the street to his pickup truck and have relations with them then. Sometimes he would leave with them, and we could never believe it. This guy was so smooth, and I guess it was the hair. I don't know what it was, but these women would leave with this guy. So at certain times, this guy was a short shift valet, and in terms of short shift valeting, what we mean by that, a regular shift, let's say, starts from 5 until midnight. Sometimes we'll hire people just to come in from 5 o'clock, from 7 o'clock until maybe about 10 or 11 o'clock, just through the main rush to get additional people in there to help move those cars. So at 11 o'clock he was always done, but he would always wait around because he had an eye on one of the ladies in the bar. So one time, I know he left specifically at, let's say, 11 o'clock with this lady, got in a car and he left with her. The next day, we have lunch shifts also at this restaurant, and he would get dropped off the next day by the same lady. We would not say anything, we wouldn't discuss anything, but this was the type of guy that each and every week he would always have a different type of girl. Was I jealous of it? No, not really. That's not really my thing, because I'm one to rather be in a long-term relationship rather than being in a relationship with all these different women that would come in each and every time. And there were some weeks where the same woman would come back in from a couple of weeks ago and they would never say anything. He would smile and he'd be like, yeah, I slept with her a couple of weeks ago. But this guy was a little Romeo. I don't know what the best word is, but yeah, that's what his motif was. Now this last story, it's funny. This is the one where we have our Monday meetings with all the managers in our office. Usually it's the general manager. We have a whole bunch of lot managers also. And this is our time to come together, discuss what's going on in a week, what happened last week, and what's going to happen weeks going forward. Well, anyway, this one week, and we always start with funnies of whatever stupid things that happened. And one of the managers says, Alex, you're not going to believe this. This morning, I text messaged this lady and her husband text messages me back. I'm like, okay, that's pretty strange. Let's back up. What is this all about? Over the weekend, he met this girl, or lady, let's say. And what happens a lot of times at a lot of our restaurants, there's a lot of conventions that go on in town. Therefore, there are a lot of supporting hotels that are in the general area. And at night, these people from the conventions will come to the restaurant to eat. Well, anyway, it's kind of been rumored that these conventions, whether it's Verizon, Sprint that's now merged with T-Mobile, or any of these things, these people become, and I hate to say this, they become ho-fests. And I know it's a horrible expression, but that's what they say. Everybody always gets with everybody else, and it's been known for that. Again, no, I've never experienced any of this, but some of the valets have. And this one valet met this lady. So she invited him to the hotel room after his shift was over, and that happened on Friday night. Apparently it was so good, they got together. He invited her on Saturday night to his place. Now the caveat is this particular place that he invited her to was one of the houses that I own. I happened to rent it to this particular valet slash manager, and he had been in it for a couple of years. Anyway, let's fast forward a little bit. We get the phone call Monday morning. I think what he did, he texted the woman after she left to go back out of town or back to her town, and he texted her to find out how she was doing. The husband retrieved the text message. He was pissed off and got into his face and like, hey, why are you texting my wife? Did you sleep with her? And his response was, I think you need to ask your wife. And that was it. He never had any more communication with her as far as I know. Now, let's fast forward 2 or 3 more weeks. I happen to keep one of my cars, which is my M3 race car that got stolen years ago, at this house because I no longer wanted to keep it in my trailer because I ended up selling the trailer after I got it retrieved. Anyway, I go over to the house to pick up the M3, and as I'm looking closer, because as a car guy, you know your cars backwards and forwards, you wash them, you clean them and everything, there's 2 palm prints on the hood of the car. Not the hood, on the roof of the car. So I call him in here, I'm like, what's the story with the print on the hood of my car, or the roof of my car? And he's like, you remember that story a couple of weeks ago with the lady that came over to the house? I said, yes. He's like, well, when she saw the race car, she got so excited and he had relations with her up against the car. Now, I should have fired him, which I couldn't, because again, I shouldn't have mixed business and pleasure. And I really should have kicked him out the house, which I didn't at that point, but I was pissed. I ended up removing the M3 from that house and bringing it over to my other location, and I put a much more generic car over there to store. So if you think some of these sex stories are crazy, these are not the only one. There are many, many more. Some of them are at the point where I have to edit them so much I can't even tell you the details. So if you ever see me at a car show one-on-one, just find me and I'll tell you the true stories, but I can't broadcast them on here. Some of these stories are insane, and this is just a tidbit of the stuff that happens out in the parking lots while you're valet parking. Anyway, thank you so much for subscribing, for watching, and of course, give a thumbs up if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you guys next time.